I like salad. Do you like salad?
Hi, I'm Hostion Ho. I'm living in Vancouver, BC, Canada, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'm an immigrant to Canada from China.
Hey everyone, I'm Andrea coming to you from Victoria, but more importantly known as unceded Akwesasne territory of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, and I am an immigrant from the United States of America. And you're listening to
Canadian salad.
Canadian salad. Hey, it's been a week. Welcome back. You're here again, Hoshin. I'm so
I
glad.
know. Today we're gonna disappoint a lot of people because it's just you and me now.
I know. But I honestly, confession, okay, I love listening to our voices. So even if this podcast is just for me, thank you. I really do appreciate this.
Yes, I do love our voices. We do
Yes.
sound really great together.
Yes, we do. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah.
excited for today's episode. I do wish we had another voice, to be honest, for this episode.
To be honest, yeah.
Yes. So maybe next week we definitely need to plan better for that. But Hoshin, do you want to share with everyone what our episode is about today?
This episode is actually for the month of February,
Yes.
which is a very significant Black History Month. I think a lot of you
Yes.
know. So today we're gonna talk about Black history and the immigrant experience.
Yeah. And our relationship as immigrants to Black History Month. I think that that is just as equally as important to be aware of the history for Black Canadians and Black immigrants that came to Canada, because there's a lot of things that I didn't know. And
Me neither. But I think a
really
lot of
important.
Canadian, like Canada-born Canadian, also didn't know, or
True.
maybe still don't
True.
know about a
Yeah.
lot of Black history because I don't think it actually is like taught in school.
Hoshin, kind of when you moved to Canada and you experienced or heard about Black History Month, what was your initial impression?
My first impression, again, I live in the States before coming to Canada. So
Okay. Okay.
my instant initial idea, of course, went back to the States about slavery, about racism, about the hierarchy and all the negative things that happens to Black people.
So when you came to Canada, it was kind of
Yeah, that's
understood
what
that that was here too. Yeah.
yeah, that was here too. But again, most of my understanding or like my initial thought, I would have to say is all like rooted in the States or
Mhm.
like the history of the States.
Mhm.
Like Lincoln, the
Yeah.
Civil War, and all of that.
Mhm.
And then I realized I really blanked out about what about Canada? Do they
Right.
have slavery here? Do they like struggle? Was there a war to liberate them? Like what was happening here?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Mhm.
about you? What was your initial thought?
I did grow up in the States. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you, I knew all of the history. But I do remember we heard a lot about the Underground Railroad and how
Yeah.
a lot of enslaved Africans would travel north to like New York, Massachusetts, the northern states, and Canada. And Canada was always the narrative, the northern states in Canada where Africans and enslaved people were free. And
Hmm.
so I just thought, wow, Canada's so much better than the States. They didn't have slavery, right? So Black History Month in Canada, I will say, was kind of like you, just kind of a blank page. I just didn't
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
very much. I've always been challenged. And so I'm still being challenged. And I think that that's really good.
Yeah, I would have to agree on that.
So I just wanted to go in, maybe just talk very briefly about the history of Black History Month. So people who are listening who may not know, like even how it was started, get an understanding. And then we'll talk a little bit about the first Black immigrants to Canada. So Black History Month was actually, so the United States, I know, in February 1926, it was Carter G. Wilson. He was a writer. He called for the United States to have a Black History Week. And I want to read a quote that the reason why he was compelled to make this week a monumental week. Quote, "If a race has no history, It has no worthwhile tradition. It becomes a negligible factor in the thought of the world, and it stands in danger of being exterminated, end quote. And so that was because enslaved Africans were in the United States, and history of Black cultures and African countries was pretty much extinguished. There was no
Mm-hmm.
knowledge of that. There was no celebration, no freedom to actually embrace those traditions and those cultural pieces. Carter G. Wilson was like, we want a recognized week so that this is in the front and center of our history, because our Black history is this country's history. And so it wasn't until 1976 that the week expanded to a month. So it was in 1976 that the US established February as Black History Month. And in
Mm-hmm.
February, Abraham Lincoln's birthday and Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. So those two
Mm-hmm.
birthdays were in the same month. So that was
Yeah,
February. Yeah. Canada jumped on the bandwagon to create a Black History Month many years later, actually in 1995.
that is many years later. Yes.
Yes. And 8 years after Britain, Britain had
Oh,
adopted a Black History Month before
before.
Canada.
Oh,
I know,
oh,
Canada, it's not
wah,
pretty, not
wah.
pretty, won't want. But we are thankful that we have a month, right? And we're thankful that the work of Carter G. Wilson and so many other Black people and Black communities continued the traditions and advocated it. And so here we are to talk really about Black immigrants. The first documented Black immigrant, we'll include all of these links, but his name was Matthew DaCosta. And in
Mm-hmm.
1600, he worked for the Governor General of Nova Scotia. And there's not some real clear details about like where he was born, like his origins or his heritage country. Some people say
Mm-hmm.
Morocco, but he spoke 5 languages, and he
Wow.
helped European settlers actually communicate with Indigenous people living in the Canadian Atlantic coast. He
Mm-hmm.
actually was known to promote peace among the two people groups, so Indigenous people and the European colonizers, and assisted explorers by working for them for 3 years. There's various documentation that he worked for other diplomats and dignitaries, and there was one story that he was unfortunately kidnapped and then forced to work for the Dutch for a while,
Oh,
doing translation work for them. He was thrown into prison for some lawsuits that came against him. And there really just is kind of his life kind of tapers off. Unfortunately, we're not exactly sure how he died. But that was the first Black immigrant
recorded.
here,
Yeah,
recorded
recorded.
here
Yeah.
in Canada. So Matthew DaCosta. And then unfortunately, the first forced immigrants were enslaved African people from the States. The history, I encourage everyone to read the history, but it was an estimated by 1790, about 3,000 enslaved men, women, and children of African descent were brought up and working in the Ontario region of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, 14 of the 17 members of the Second Parliament and six of the 16 members of Upper Canada Parliament had Black people enslaved or were from slaveholding families. So slavery was alive
Oh,
and well, unfortunately, in Canada.
in Canada, yeah.
Yeah, very much was. And so after, unfortunately, some very dark days, and there was no distinction between the way that Americans had treated enslaved people versus the way Canadians treated them. I mean, there was still
Mm-hmm.
torture and death and all these terrible things that had been done. So Canada does not get a free get out of jail free card. She's definitely
Yeah.
accountable. But it was in actually 1793 that there was an act against slavery in Canada, and this act actually banned the importation of enslaved people, but it
Mm-hmm.
didn't free anyone, right? There was no, it was just said, well, you can't bring in people who are enslaved
Enslaved,
anymore.
but people that are enslaved in Canada that's are still
They're
were still
still,
enslaved. Yeah.
exactly,
Ooh.
exactly. So it wasn't until 1838, July 31st, 1838, that Canada had its own Emancipation Day, where
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
basically declared that Black people are free and there will
Mm-hmm.
be no
Mm-hmm.
slaves. And I
Yeah.
believe that was also for Indigenous people as well. So going forward in this dark history of Canada, in 1911, there was pushed forward an effort to ban Black immigrants to Canada. So in
Ooh,
one of our episodes, we did talk about how there were Black Americans who wanted to come to Alberta because there was word that they're building railroads and there were jobs and the economy and everything
yeah.
like that. And so they tried to immigrate and a ban tried to get enforced, but it never went through to the upper levels of policy and decision making, but this ban was still embedded in those who were in power. So they would make up excuses as to why Black people couldn't immigrate to Canada. One of those reasons was like, oh, well, you're not as healthy as people who live here. They would make up stupid excuses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Racism again. I think
yeah, again.
the early 1900s, Canada had definitely laid out a lot of laws to ban all kinds of immigrants, like even the Chinese
Yeah,
exclusion, at which we
right,
explored a couple episodes ago. It was also laid out in 1923. So like the
right.
early 1900s, Canada has the upper management, the government
Yeah, it
definitely
was.
were, yeah,
Mhm.
doing a lot of effort to ban immigrants.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very evil time, very oppressive time for a lot of people of color. And so I mean, that's what I don't want to end with is that like Black history is more than the enslavement of Black people. It's more than the history of oppression and racism that people experienced. And there are, you know, there's the Black Porters. They were gentlemen who worked in the trains. There was Viola Desmond. She was known as the Rosa Parks of Canada. Her story is incredible. She's actually on the $10 bill in Canada, the
Oh,
purple
yes,
one.
yes.
Yes, which
Yeah.
anytime I get the $10 bill with Viola, I'm like, "Oh, Viola," just her lovely face and just that reminder of like what she did and how much she endured. She was the first person to be exonerated by the government of Canada and given a
hmm
pardon for something that she was wrongfully accused of. So there is so much more to that history, but that's just kind of a very brief overview of Black history in Canada and the struggle really of what has
Yeah.
happened. Yeah,
Yeah, of course, the histories in Canada for Black people definitely more than their struggle.
right.
Is definitely more than the oppression that the government has lay on to them. Is
Hmm.
also a history of their endurance, of their persistence, of their joy, of their unity, of their way of life.
Hmm.
So I think it's also always important to remind ourselves that. And there's many, like we're all, of course, all these bans or the immigrants, what happened to them, or laws and acts are just a very blanket
Right,
statement to what happened.
right,
But under that blanket, as many individuals were also, is if every individual has have a very vivid life, that
right,
families that create so much memory and joy and beautiful things that we also important for us to remember and honored in many ways. And I think that is also we should be reminding ourselves that when celebrating um February Black History Month
yeah.
as well. It is
Hmm.
individuals, their lives, they're not that much different than their purpose, their how what makes them happy. They are not that different from
Right.
us. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And again, this is why, I mean, again, yeah, one podcast cannot capture
Yeah.
everything that
No, we
right that we
can't.
would want to highlight. And so we kind of want to segue into our responsibility as immigrants in Canada with Black History Month and with
Yes.
Black immigrants who are here and how we elevate them and honor them. The great advocacy body here in Canada, it's called Youth Friendly. They were talking about what Black history meant to them. And I want to read this quote that they stated. One of the students said, quote, "While Black History Month is about honoring the impact and contributions of the Black community, it's also a critical time for non-Black people to get to work." I think there's this, and I see this in myself, there is colonialism and white supremacy. These systems are very much like, get it right. If you don't get it
Yes.
right, don't do it at all.
hmm
Right.
hmm
And so I've always had this fear like, oh, I just don't want to mess up. I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I was listening to a Black activist, and she was saying, white people, we don't have time for you to get it right. We don't have time for you to like perfect your messaging. Like, we just need you to show up. We just
Yeah.
need you to speak out. We just need your solidarity. We need your allyship. We need your activism. There
Mm-hmm.
is no perfect way to do this. Just get to work. And I think that that is something that, as immigrants here in Canada, I think it's very, very important that we disband away from this idea that as immigrants, we just want to do the right thing. And I get where that comes from. But I think when it comes to each other, like, we just have to show up for one another, and we have to be
Yeah.
present, and we have to allow the people that are around us to shape those narratives, right? Like, I don't want to shape the
Mm-hmm.
narrative of Black people for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I want Black people, I want Black Canadians to shape that narrative. And a lot of that comes by listening and showing up.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely on point there. Because sometimes I even catch myself to the same experience as you, that I feel like, oh, if I'm going to a protest, for Black people, or a party that celebrates Black joy, I feel like, oh, maybe I always have a lot of consideration what I should do or should not do. Am I doing it right? Would that be appropriate? Like, what
Right.
this all these concerns. But I think, as you mentioned, sometimes you just need to be there. I think
Yeah.
being there, and maybe that's all that it is. Because for all of us, there's no perfect way. I think even for Black people, there's no perfect way. I mean, I don't speak for them, obviously, but they're all doing it first time for all of us. This
Yeah.
anti-Blackness, this anti-racism thing for all of us is a first time thing, because there's no past experience, like a perfect kind of map for us to follow.
No. Mm-mm.
No. So
No.
like, I
It's
don't know, sometimes, yeah, we really
Yeah,
know.
there's no
If there,
templates. There's no book.
yeah,
There's no like, this is how you do it, because everyone's so different. And
yeah,
there's
if
such a
there, yeah.
diversity in even Black communities, right?
Agree, yeah.
And there are going to be discrepancies. There are going to be differences. There are going to be people arguing about how you do things, and that's just being human, because we are all different. But I think, yeah, to your point, I think that worry and that fear paralyzes us
I agree. Then you
from
just
action.
less, yeah, and you're just less willing to do it because you worry, you're nervous, and
Right.
then drive yourself away from your purpose, which just
Right.
to support, and being there is a support already.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think another way that we as immigrants can be a part of change and be a part of making Canada a better, safer space for Black people is really educating ourselves and educating each other. I
Mm.
know there are quite a few articles that had came out in Canada talking about how education about Black history just really falls short in
Yeah.
Canada's history textbooks. Many
Yeah.
Canadian-born people don't know about the Black history that is here. And Black
Yeah.
history is Canadian history, right? Like,
It is. Yeah.
right. And so I think that's a huge piece. The other piece, I think, for that is very tangible for all of us, is in our workplaces. There was a really great research study that came out of York University where it surveyed Black people across Canada concerning racism in the workplace. And the consensus is that the workplace is the epicenter of racism for Black people living in
Hmm.
Canada. 90%, 90% of Black Canadians see the workplaces of racism as a serious problem, not only the criminal justice system, but also in the workplace. And so for us as immigrants, like, having a voice, speaking out when we see it happen, not doubting a Black person's experience in the workplace. I can recall at a workplace I was at, and one of the ladies that worked there, she was a white lady. She was doubting the message and the experience that my Black colleague was trying to share with her, and just writing it off like, no, that didn't happen to you. I'm sure the person who said that didn't really mean it. Right. So she was kind of policing her
Oh,
experience,
yeah.
and I looked at this white lady and I said, "That's not true." I said, "I was there in the same room and that didn't happen to me." I said,
Gaslighting.
right? Yeah. And
Hmm.
so if we're not showing up and we're not speaking up for racism in the workplace and unfair treatment and oppression, are you just going
Will
to continue to happen?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually also hurts you if you are also immigrants. Like, there's no liberation is for all. If any group, any minority group are being, discriminated, maybe you think, oh, is not that common, is that towards me? Eventually, that kind of mindset will come back to you.
Hmm. Yeah, it
Because
will.
liberation, there's no liberation
No,
for all if any one person is
no.
being discriminated. Yeah.
And I think that was Nelson Mandela who actually said that when he was in prison, he saw the white man and he saw in that moment that the white man was not free
Yeah.
because they were not making us free. You know,
Yeah.
that the white man was bound to this ideology of oppression and there was no freedom in that. There was no freedom
No.
for that white person. And you're absolutely right. No one is free until all of us are free.
Yes.
Um, yeah. Um, and then I think the other piece is just, I think sometimes I am guilty of this, but I think because I don't want to make a mistake and I want to honor Black people for who they are, I put them on a pedestal and I
Mm-hmm.
elevate them and I don't let them be imperfect, right? I
Oh,
don't, in my mind, right? I don't let them just be a normal person. To
mm-hmm,
wake up
mm-hmm.
with their hair all messy, to let them get angry when they're upset about something, right? There is
Yeah.
this internal monologue that I've been conditioned to respond to, like, oh, why is that person being so loud, right? Like that racism is there inside of me because that's how I was raised, the
Mm-hmm,
culture that
mm-hmm.
I was raised in, the systems that I'm surrounded by. And I recognize that there's something that it comes up, but it is there. And so it's allowing Black people to just be themselves. Like if they want to be a nerd, if they want to like watch Star Trek or like love science experiments, or if they're really into classical music, or whatever it is that they are shaping the narrative about themselves, and I'm not putting my predisposed ideas of what Black or quote unquote is.
Yeah. I think there's also another side of the story that remind me of I have a friend who's Black as well. He told me he's a hot blood person.
Okay.
So sometimes
Okay.
he get too excited or too loud or too erratic. But he always worried that because that's how he is, he
Yeah.
worried that people just gonna put him in that box that he's just like an angry Black person because that
Right.
stereotype that
Right.
follows almost every
Right.
Black man or Black woman.
Yeah.
So he felt like he cannot just be that loud, excited,
Yeah.
erratic person because of that stereotype, because that
Mm-hmm.
box, because what people expect of
Mm-hmm.
him. This kind of
Mm-hmm.
invisible expectations.
Right.
I don't want people to discriminate me.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
remember when he told me that story, also was like that is one of the consequences of racism that is just you cannot be
Yeah.
who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think white people, until the tables are flipped,
Yeah.
I don't think we will really ever fully understand.
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, you can't just be who you are. That's kind of
Yeah.
this restriction. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
as in many ways white people can necessarily understand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can just let your emotion freely flow, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right. Hoshin, do you have anything else to add to like our responsibility as immigrants?
Oh yeah, I think one more thing is to celebrate Black joy.
Yes.
Yes, I think we
Yes.
also kind of talk about that touch on it a little bit before. Like the Black history in Canada is also a history of Black joy as well. And I
Yeah.
think for me personally, Black History Month for me is more important to kind of focus on that joy part because if we always see them as a product of struggle or with a symbol of discrimination, we will eliminate all of their humanity because being human for me is that joy part that we get to connect, that we get to create, that we get to innovate, that we get to form communities and create memories. So I think that part we all need to participate in it to celebrate that Black
Absolutely.
joy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I also want to share some resources. I want to celebrate Dr. Andre Brock. He has a publication called Distributed Blackness. He said Black joy makes waves on internet as a response to racial battle fatigue and Black trauma, which I think
Mm.
we also kind of touched on that a little bit before that, in mass media, almost everywhere you look, when you see Black people, it's always brutality or discrimination,
Right.
racism,
Right.
and being killed, being slaughtered, being racialized. And I think a lot of not just like as a non-Black person like myself, that sometimes I do get that fatigue because oh, it happened again, again, and again. I think for the Black community itself too, I would assume that sometimes I think they will be tired of that's how they're always portrayed in these stories. So I think especially in that kind of narrative under that kind of environment, Black joy is even more important because you give them back that humanity. It also highlights that, and sometimes I personally think it highlights that even after all this trauma that you see, all this discrimination and hardship, they still able to find joy, to celebrate themselves, to create,
Yeah.
um, to face adversity and turn a new page.
Mm.
So I think that's also what we need to remember.
Yeah.
In that joy is a story of victory in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely a story of victory because they rise above all else
Yeah.
and still
Yeah.
being able to put a smile on their face.
Yeah.
Um, so that is which also I want to share. And the second, which also I want to share, is by Trisha Hersey. She's an artist and an activist and a
Okay.
speaker. She had a website called the Napped Ministry, which is really fun. I think you all should take a look. We will put
Ministry.
Yeah,
Oh.
we put the resource on the website, obviously, because for her, she had this slogan which I really love: rest is resistance. I think from that quote,
Yes.
you can see that a lot of her articles, her performance art, presentations are mostly about the
Mm.
power of rest.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
I think in this colonialism, capitalism system, that we always kind of like expected to work hard to create value. If you don't work your ass off, don't hustle, it is bad. Especially for like racialized group, like for example, Black community
Yeah.
people. The bigger picture, the system already oppressed them. They
Right.
have to, in everyday life, they have to work twice as hard just to get the same level of recognition or even
Exactly.
income in many ways. So they always, white people or this in big environment created a way more difficult system for them to work on
Mm-hmm.
just to get the same level of
Mm-hmm.
recognition, and still
Mm-hmm.
we expect them to work even
Mm-hmm.
harder. Or if you don't work hard, then you're just
Right.
you don't get to where I am today is because you are lazy. And
Right.
I think that
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
narrative, we need to kind of
Mm.
change that. And so
Yeah.
Trisha just want to kind of let people know that there is power in resting. In
Yes.
resting, you also kind of overturn that idea of capitalism, of colonialism, in some sense even
Yeah.
racism. You have to believe
Mm-hmm.
in yourself. Your value is not dependent on how much value you create, how hard you work. Your value
Right.
is solely relying on your humanity, that you are a
Yes.
human being that breathe and connects with others. And that
Right.
is your true value, and that is
Yes.
a power in you. So
Yeah.
rest is resistance.
Yeah.
And I love
Absolutely.
that so much.
Yes. Yeah. Because rest is existence.
Yeah, it is. We
That's
all
just
need rest.
existing. It's being. I long for the day where people don't have to defend that their existence. They don't have to defend their rest, right? Where they don't
Yeah,
have to like have someone like, well, why aren't you doing anything? It's like I'm just being, right? I'm
I
just
know.
existing. This is who I am. Go, right?
And
Like, don't
yeah,
stop being
and
obsessed with that.
And I think being like a racialized group, a human is already difficult enough. We cannot, in our most normal states, the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can rest already. So for us
Mm-hmm.
to really find that true meaning of resting without worrying about how we're gonna represent ourselves to the world, worrying about, oh, am I gonna be painted as a Black angry person? Whether I'm gonna be stereotyped because I said certain things or dressed in a certain way, like like have that true rest is really difficult enough for many racialized group,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, because this world is not created for us in
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's important, for the Black community and also for people that is not, that's not being a Black community, that allows them that space to rest, give them the space to rest, give that
Yeah.
safe space, and even help them, let them know that it's okay. You don't have to always work that hard. You know,
Yeah.
lazy is not a thing in many
It's
ways.
not. It's
It really is
not.
not.
If
You
there's a
resting,
lazy
yeah.
race, oh, I have opinions about a lazy race, and I'm them. So just give a hint there. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There was this singer, his name is Josh Garrels,
Hmm.
and a quote from one of his songs, "Our rest is a weapon against man's obsession to control things." Right? That it is this, you know what? I'm gonna fight your obsession to control me by resting. And
Yeah,
that's
I'm
gonna
not gonna
leave
do it.
you dumbfounded and you're angry and upset, like, no, I need to control you. No, you can't, because I'm a human and I'm gonna rest. I'm gonna exist. This is my existence, and Black people deserve that existence. Have
Exactly.
been,
Yes.
right? Since
Yeah.
since the beginning of the world, since time immemorial, right?
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think we all have that responsibility to create a space for them when you're with
Yes.
maybe your Black friends, your Black colleagues, or whatever.
Yes.
Remember to put your judgment aside, away, out of the door.
Mhm.
Let them be who
Mhm.
they are, no matter what they
Yeah.
do. Just, oh, that's who they being them. That's all that it
Yeah.
is. No
Yeah.
judgment, no afterthought. Let them be.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to share, last resource I want to share is called the Black Joy Project. Again, we will put a link on our
Ooh.
website. It has a lot of resources of Black Joy, publications, podcasts, music, books. So if you want to kind of participate in the Black Joy and see how Black Joy revolutionized in many ways the Black community's narrative, or even my narrative of how the Black resistance, I think it was a
Mm.
great place to
Mm.
start because there's so many resources that you can, whichever media format that you like to start, they have
That's
it.
great, Hoshin. Yeah. No, that's really, really great. Yeah, finding those authors or those musicians or those poets or the fashion designers,
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? I think
Hmm.
expand your exposure beyond the
Exactly.
ones
Yeah.
that are popular and kind of mainstream and white, and whatever Canada and the US tend to like center on. And I feel like that's going to be a really good resource, because I mean, I've got a lot of artists and authors that I follow on social media, Black Americans, and I am so thankful for the generosity sometimes that they are willing to share, because
Yeah.
they don't have to. They, we, I feel like I'm in debt to, and maybe I don't even know if I should say this, but like I do feel like I'm in debt to people of color until things change. Like I feel like I want to always be paying it forward or working hard to make sure that that gets changed, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with you on that because I think this great world culture that we're currently enjoying, the BIPOC community creates a lot of things we enjoy nowadays, like from
Yeah.
music to dance, like Black people invented jazz, rock and roll, hip hop. I like even the ballroom culture that I currently enjoy and a part of is also created by the Black community. So a lot of things nowadays that I enjoy entertainment and culture,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them are because of
Mm-hmm.
them thriving and refuse to give up in
Yeah.
slavery,
Mm-hmm.
in oppression. They
Mm-hmm.
kept their head high and keep
Mm-hmm.
innovating and keep that joy, keep passing down that joy. So
Yeah.
I definitely feel that about,
Mm.
that the feeling that you're in debt part.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to kind of end before we get into our quiz, but I do believe that joy is contagious. It
Very
is
contagious.
something that it's really hard to resist joy. And all the more reason that we center ourselves around joy and embrace joy from all communities, Black people, Asian communities, South American communities, the global majority, right?
Yeah, the global majority,
Yeah,
yes.
there's just so much joy to be had, and I think those go hand in hand. So I really appreciate you bringing up that Black joy and all of these resources. Ocean's been so, yeah, so good for me. But Yeah.
Yes, because as you said, joyous and contagious. And especially in Black History Month, we need to celebrate their joy
Yes.
because
Yeah.
in that joy is a
Yes.
great story of
Mm-hmm.
how they survive, they thrive.
Yeah, and it gives you momentum to keep going forward. I think
Exactly.
if you're always just working, 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 and you never take time to rest or to celebrate or to have merriment or feasting or time with friends, you can't sustain yourself. It's good to work hard for change. And I think part of that working hard is taking time for joy and to
Yeah,
celebrate
exactly.
in advance.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
So
so
yay,
yeah,
joy.
Black History, Black Joy Month. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're gonna go into our quiz.
Yay.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. Hoshin doesn't know the answer to my question. I don't know the answer to his question.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see who does a better job at answering this question this week. Probably
Oh,
Hoshin.
let's hope. I
Let's
don't know
just
about
say
that.
it's gonna be
The
Hoshin.
past couple weeks, you get the answers right.
We'll see. Okay.
Okay, do you want to go
Um,
first?
Sure, I would love to. Okay. I look up to this woman a lot. Who was the Canadian Black singer who, during the national anthem at an NBA All-Star game, sang instead of Our Home and Native Land, she sang Our Home on Native Land. Do you
Oh
remember
my
her
God,
name?
I saw that. Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember her name,
Got
but
a
I
great name.
definitely
It's her first name is the month you were born.
July.
Uh-huh. July
Oh,
Black.
July Black. That is a
Yeah.
great name. I
July
am so sorry I
Black.
forgot that name, but I definitely
No,
know
that's
that. That's
okay.
news.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so she did. She sang the Canadian national anthem, Our Home and Native Land, which anyway, that's a whole other episode about like anthems and everything like that. But she did. She changed just one word from and to on, acknowledging that the native land is where we all exist here in Canada.
Yeah.
And of course, all the white people were just like, "Oh, how could you?
Outraged.
Our anthem? Oh no!" But it was actually she was honored for this gesture by the Aboriginal First Nations Special Chiefs Assembly. Honored her for that one thing, that one change. And there's a pretty iconic photo of her, and we'll include that
I
on our
think
episode links.
that news is also a great representation of how one community can uplift another one.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's one word. It's and
It is one
on,
word,
but
but that
so
word
much
has such,
power.
yeah, exactly,
Yes,
so much power that it changed the
absolutely.
narrative to how you
Yes,
perceive. Because home and native land, home on native land is a different perception of how you
completely.
see the land here in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
also genius as well
Yes. So, and for us as immigrants, obviously an example of how we have that power to just
to uplift each
to
other
uplift each other. And it
every
doesn't have to
opportunity.
be these grand gestures. It can be very, very simple.
Yeah, one word is set from
One
one
word. Yeah.
word, two letters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as
Exactly.
little as that.
Yeah, I know, right? So, all
Yes.
right. Good job, Hoshin. Even though you didn't
Thank you
get
for,
it.
oh my God, wow, your question is amazing. Now I feel my question is a bit basic.
Okay.
Very basic.
All right.
My question is I think you already have the answer because I know you look up a
Okay.
lot of data.
We'll
Do you know
see.
which city in Canada has the most black population?
I did not see the stat. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna say Ottawa.
Ooh, close enough
Close enough?
geographically. Close enough,
Toronto.
but no. Yes, Toronto
Toronto.
is the
Okay,
answer.
yes.
Toronto had the highest black population. Yes.
Okay, okay, yes, nice. That's really cool. I've never been to Toronto. I need to go because
They have a Jamaican village, which is like really nice. A lot of great Jamaican food. Also, it's like a black community, obviously,
mm,
but they are being like gentrified right now, which is like a big thing. Same
thing.
as like the Chinatown in here, Vancouver, kind of being
Yeah,
a lot of condo being built and blah blah blah, and being gentrified. And
yeah, yeah,
but
that's
if
frustrating.
you go to Toronto, please go to Jamaican kind of area. The food is great, and I love
Mm,
that. It's very lively
yeah,
in many ways.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Awesome. Well, Hoshin, thank you for this conversation. I think I echo your point. I think we want to do this episode right. We want to talk about Black History Month right, and we probably made
Mm-hmm.
mistakes. And
We were not
yeah,
perfect.
And so I welcome any feedback from anyone about this episode, but I also want to say that, I'm thankful that we sometimes just putting one foot forward is the step that we need to take. Share this episode and this podcast with all your friends and family. We can get more connections and more people to voice their experiences on this podcast, which is what we would love to do.
Yeah.
So
We love stories too. If you have so many
yes.
stories that you think that you want to share with us, that we would love to share your story on our podcast as well. Because
Yeah.
story has immense power.
Immense power.
Immense
Yes.
power. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And if you want to share, contact us on Instagram, Canadian Salad, on our website, canadiansalad.ca. Send us an email too, hello@canadiansalad.ca. You can send us an email and we will respond and we would love to hear from you. So stay tuned because next week we're going to finish our 3-part series on love and
Finally.
relationships. I know.
Yes.
All those married people had plans. And we're going to talk about the final type of relationship, which is long-term relationships, civil unions, and marriage for immigrants in Canada. So do stay tuned. Thanks for listening. And thank you, Hoshin, for being you.
Oh, thank you. You being you as
Yes.
well.
Anytime. All
Okay,
right. Thanks, everyone.
bye.
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 Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hostion and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avityan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Drinklin production.